still wake up some nights gasping, drenched in sweat. The echo of that burning heat pressing down on me like a living thing. Nobody believes what really happened here, except me, and now you. My name is Thomas Garrett. I'm a thermal systems engineer, a former military man recently transferred to Facility Delta 7, a secret underground complex built inside Mount Blackstone, a supposedly extinct volcano deep in Oregon's Cascade Range. When I arrived, they said I was here to fix an energy extraction anomaly. The truth was, something far darker was lurking beneath the surface. The helicopter flight was turbulent, the cold air slicing through the mountain passes as we neared the base camp, nestled in a collapsed valley near the volcano's dormant flanks. Heat radiated backward through my jacket, even before I stepped inside the elevator shaft that spiraled down almost 800 meters below the surface. Facility Delta 7 was a marvel of human engineering. 5 levels carved directly from volcanic rock, metal girders fused into the walls, glowing vents siphoning geothermal energy from molten magma through a network of reinforced pipes. My team was reduced and fractured. Of the original 18 personnel, only 5 remained. They all said the rest were evacuated for safety reasons. Yet no records existed, no orders, no communications from the missing scientists. I met the ones left: Rebecca Stone, the chief geologist; David Walsh, our systems engineer; Amanda Rivers, the rigid security chief with a Navy SEAL past; and Ethan Brooks, a jittery communications technician who barely looked me in the eye. Inside, the markers of their anxiety were everywhere. Lights flickered with no pattern. Equipment would fail only for moments, then recover like nothing happened. The air was thick with an acrid tang. Not sulfur, but something metallic and unnatural. Rebecca avoided looking at the blackened pipes that snaked through the energy extraction chamber. David refused to admit to any problem, but his eyes told a different story. Amanda patrolled the corridors with a quiet intensity, always listening, always watching. Ethan muttered strange sequences into his headset, as if decoding a language only he could hear. Something was wrong. The last thing I expected was to find a formation growing inside the pipes. A black crystal, alive, pulsating with a strange light invisible to the naked eye, but clear on our instruments. Even the magma below seemed to resonate with it. I doubt I'll ever forget the way the heat became almost unbearable when I approached that chamber. The way the hum of the facility shifted to a low, vibrating drone in my skull. Days passed with nothing but the eerie normalcy of the base and its quietly malfunctioning machines. Every day felt heavier, as if the rock around us was breathing, alive. Amanda kept up her patrols with laser focus, but even her movements betrayed a growing exhaustion, an edge of fear she refused to admit. Rebecca began spending long hours in the chambers closest to the magma, whispering about the crystalline formation like it was a message waiting to be understood. David was consumed by his systems, running endless diagnostics against errors that nobody else could reproduce. Ethan became increasingly withdrawn, his eyes sunken, mumbling to himself about voices in the frequency bands no one else monitored. I tried to maintain my focus on the technical work, on fixing the faults in the energy extraction, but the facility had other plans. One morning, I found the lab in darkness, lights flickering on and off. The pipes vibrated with a deep hum, and the temperature swung wildly, from deadly cold to blistering heat in moments. It was as if the volcano itself was waking, testing its nerves. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving just beyond my peripheral vision, vanishing the moment I turned. Things deteriorated fast after that. One by one, the subtle changes became undeniable. Voices echoed in halls where no one was. Instrument readings twisted into impossible patterns. The crystal in the depths pulsed brighter, throbbing with a presence. I started having nightmares, not dreams, but memories not my own, fragments of other lives trapped within the black mineral. I watched Amanda's demeanor become colder, more robotic. David's eyes grew vacant. Ethan stopped speaking altogether, communicating only through cryptic notes. Rebecca refused to leave the chamber where the crystal grew, convinced it was the key to understanding the facility's failures. I remember the first time I saw it, or rather felt it, a presence creeping beneath the crushing weight of stone and heat. A shudder ran through the entire facility, a pulse felt in every vibration sensor throughout the complex. Amanda didn't mention it, neither did Walsh, but I saw the way her hand gripped the railings tighter, the way his gaze sharpened. In the control room, I noticed readings spiking on the spectrum analyzer, patterns too precise, too rhythmic to be natural. The crystal had an intelligence. It was learning. Late one night, I caught Ethan whispering in a language I had never heard, a cadence filled with mathematics and meaning. He looked at me then, eyes wide and unblinking. "They're watching," he said. At first, I thought it was paranoia. But when the lights flickered out and the speakers began to emit whispers, soft, unintelligible, yet undeniably present, it became impossible to deny. I found a journal in the storage bays, those off-limit rooms no one talked about. Pages filled with frantic scrawlings from missing team members, words that described visions of otherworldly geometry and voices echoing through time. I thought I'd been sent here to fix a malfunction. Instead, I was witnessing the unraveling of minds. The temperature fluctuated wildly. Heat waves rippled from the core, warping the steel supports. More than once, the facility shook with tremors, small enough not to register alarms, but enough to send chills down my spine. I've recorded every moment, every anomaly. Because when the others don't want to talk about it, when Walsh grew silent, when Rebecca's eyes burned with obsession rather than fear, when Amanda's posture became rigid, too precise like a machine, I'm the only one left who remembers. This is my confession. I quickly realized that something unsettling had settled over Facility Delta 7, though no one said it outright. Only 5 of the original 18 staff remained, and the silence about the others gnawed at me. Rebecca claimed they were evacuated for safety reasons, an official measure due to instabilities detected weeks before. But no paperwork, no communications, literally nothing backed it up. The base felt too empty, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The equipment was glitching in ways that defied logic. Temperatures recorded in the magma extraction pipes plunged below freezing, something utterly impossible given the molten rock outside. Our monitors would flicker, displaying readouts that made no sense. Impossible sin waves, rhythms so eerily precise they sounded manufactured rather than natural. David Walsh, our systems engineer, refused to acknowledge the anomalies, despite my attempts to draw his attention. His focus had intensified, obsessive. He racked up hours running diagnostics on systems that showed no real faults. His eyes betrayed something on the edge of obsession, refusing contact, always staring past me as if reaching for something unseen. Amanda Rivers, the security chief, patrolled the corridors relentlessly. She moved like a ghost, quiet, watchful, her footsteps muffled by the dim emergency lighting. I thought her Navy SEAL training would make her calm under pressure. Instead, I started sensing an edge of fear underneath her stoicism. Ethan Brooks, the communications technician, was worse. He spent long stretches frozen in front of his consoles, whispering strange number sequences into his headset. I overheard snippets, fractured codes, patterns repeating like mantras. And sometimes he just stared into space, his face ashen. The air inside the facility shifted too. There was an acrid scent, metallic and sharp, that lingered heavy in the ventilation ducts. It was wrong. Alien to this underground world warmed by molten rock and sulfur. Not some natural chemical, but something synthetic or worse. I started noticing subtle vibrations beneath my feet, irregular and low. They didn't match any recorded seismic activity. The rock around us was humming quietly, but not with the rhythm of the earth. It felt more deliberate. Conversations between the remaining team became hushed whispers, or tended to disappear into silence. Rebecca avoided my gaze, especially when I asked about the strange readings and the missing staff. She clung to her geology instruments and spoke only of the volcanic phenomena, never the anomalies. One day, I found her staring for hours at the blackened extraction pipes leading deep into the earth. murmuring about crystalline formations, something growing inside that no one had catalogued. David, meanwhile, dove deeper into system controls, bypassing protocols, trying to understand that which none of us could explain. Amanda's patrols lengthened, and I caught her more than once scanning the security cameras as if expecting something to appear, something we were all too scared to name. Ethan's whispers grew louder, more frantic, until I confronted him. His eyes were wide, shimmering with fear or madness. "They're reaching out," he said. "Through the noise, through the machines. They're trying to tell us something." It was impossible to tell if he was warning us or succumbing to some unseen pressure. Yet, with each passing day, the facility felt less our home and more a cage trapping us with a silent watcher. Communication with the outside world remained cut off. No signals, no messages, despite repeated attempts. The hopeless isolation pressed down, heavier than the volcanic rock overhead. More than once, instruments glitched simultaneously, lights flickering in corridors, echoing empty footsteps. Sometimes, I caught whispers, faint and unintelligible, flowing out of the ventilation shafts and old speaker systems. I knew something was alive down there, something beyond human understanding or technology. And it was watching. The hypocrisy of calm among the team was the most disturbing thing. We pretended normalcy despite the surreal, inexplicable signs gathered around us. As the days blurred, I found myself struggling not just with the failing systems, but with the oppressive silence, the impossible data, and the growing divide between the team. This was no ordinary malfunction. Deep inside the volcano, beneath layers of hardened rock and magma, something was awakening, and we were its audience, its prisoners. The nights were the worst. With the main systems in reduced power mode, the facility slipped into near silence, save for the hum of emergency generators and the occasional creak of settling rock. I lay awake, listening to the distant rumblings. Not seismic, but something rhythmic, like a heartbeat. One night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my quarters. When I opened the door, the corridor was empty, except for the faint glow of emergency lights. But the floor bore wet footprints, irregular and dark as fresh tar, leading toward the extraction tunnels. I tried to speak with the others about it, but they dismissed my concerns or changed the subject. Trust began eroding fast. Rebecca's evasiveness turned into hostility. She forbade me from entering certain areas, citing safety protocols. David shut down parts of the monitoring systems without explanation. Amanda tightened security checkpoints with new restrictions, her eyes distant and cold. Ethan locked himself away in the comms room, surrounded by antiquated radio equipment. I found torn pages from a notebook scattered on the floor, filled with strange symbols and patterns that resembled no language I recognized. Fear warped the facility from a research base into a crypt. I attempted to keep a log of anomalies, equipment failures, strange vibrations, unexplained shadows, and the growing silence of my colleagues. But I started hearing things too. Whispers from vents, electronic voices echoing in empty rooms, and worst of all, a persistent low hum suffusing the air like an invisible presence. Day by day, the impossible became undeniable. One afternoon, while running diagnostics near the magma extracting pipes, I noticed the temperature gauges fluctuating wildly at a rhythm. A steady pulse in and out, like a manic breath. The voltage in the systems surged and fell with similar precision. Nothing random about it. When I shared these observations with Rebecca, she clenched her jaw but said only, "You don't understand what this means." None of us do. I began suspecting she knew more than she admitted. At night, I watched shadows shift where no light should be, heard faint echoes from deep within the earth, a distorted voice perhaps, or a forgotten song reverberating through volcanic chambers. The facility, my refuge and prison, was becoming something alive. Not the cold, mechanized complex I'd been trained to maintain, but a breathing entity, pulsating with unknown purpose. And we were trapped inside it. The line between reality and something else, something vast and unknowable, started to blur. The day I discovered the hidden chamber remains etched in my mind, as the moment reality splintered into something unrecognizable. It started with a routine inspection of the extraction pipes, those serpentine tubes funneling geothermal energy from the molten earth. I had walked that corridor countless times, but that morning, as I passed through the industrial haze, an odd draft brushed against my skin, a coldness completely out of place in the searing heat of the volcano's heart. Curiosity drove me to investigate further. Using my thermal scanner, I mapped the pipe network thoroughly, and that's when the anomaly appeared. A faint gap, barely discernible in the rock. A door concealed within the volcanic stone, undetected by the blueprints and earlier surveys. The metal frame was warped, stained with a dull black residue that almost seemed organic, a slight shimmer as if wet or alive. I hesitated only a moment before overriding the security lockout, my fingers trembling as I activated the manual release, heart pounding in my ears. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The chamber was nothing like the rest of the facility. It was smaller, claustrophobic, and pulsated with a rhythm that seemed both mechanical and alive. The walls shimmered with a strange oily sheen that danced in the flickering red lights from my helmet. A faint hum vibrated through the air, an almost musical cadence that resonated deep in my bones. At the center of this alien sanctum stood a massive crystalline structure, black as obsidian, but unlike anything I'd ever seen. Impossibly intricate, fractal geometries folding into themselves with an elegance that was both beautiful and grotesque. It sent out faint pulses that my thermal scanner detected as infrared signals, rhythms that resembled slow, deliberate breathing. The crystal wasn't static. It throbbed and writhed like a living organism, formed not merely from stone, but perhaps from something far more complex, a biological machine intertwined with raw, volcanic glass. I fumbled for my radio, voice barely steady. "Rebecca, come quickly. I found something unexpected." Her arrival was swift, but when she looked upon the black monolith, the usual calm she carried shattered like glass. Her face paled, eyes wide with an unspoken terror. "That shouldn't be here," she whispered, barely audible. "I don't know how it got here, but it's not just a mineral formation. This is something else entirely." Not long after, David stormed in, clearly alarmed by the sudden call. His gaze swept over the structure as he hurriedly pulled out Geiger counters and electromagnetic anomaly detectors. The numbers started to climb off the charts, radiation levels mixed with frequencies that defied classification. "These readings don't match any known terrestrial phenomenon," he muttered, voice uneasy. "It's emitting signals, but not natural ones." Amanda appeared last, grit lining her voice as she barked orders to secure the chamber. "Seal it off. Nobody enters or leaves till we figure out what we're dealing with," she commanded, hand hovering near her holstered firearm. Even Ethan was drawn to the crystal's eerie presence. He stood a few feet back, eyes glassy and fixated, lips moving silently in rhythm. When I asked what he was doing, he barely looked up. "It's talking to us," he murmured, voice hollow as if repeating ancient incantations. The chamber's atmosphere was unsettlingly volatile. Temperature gauges nearby swung wildly. The air would shift from icy chill to blistering heat with terrifying suddenness. Electronic instruments died without warning, some screens flooded with indecipherable codes and symbols that danced just beyond comprehension. Despite every warning in my gut, I felt an unnatural pull drawing me closer. A crushing pressure pressed against my temples, a ringing in my ears that synchronized with the crystal's slow, rhythmic pulses. Time seemed to disintegrate around me. Seconds stretched and folded like rubber, leaving me disoriented and struggling to maintain grip on the present moment. Rebecca noticed my change immediately. "You don't want to stay too long," she said, voice shaking with dread. "It warps your mind. We've lost people to it already. Their thoughts fragmented, their memories shattered before they disappeared." With considerable effort, I forced myself to focus on documentation, meticulously recording every detail. The crystal's geometric form was nothing short of mathematical perfection, sacred geometry forged from darkness itself. Light twisted unnaturally around its facets, bending in impossible ways and casting shadows that seemed to flicker just beyond the edge of vision. David, who prided himself on rationality, found skepticism slipping away under the relentless evidence. "This isn't something natural," he confessed quietly. "We're facing either an alien intelligence or a fragment of a prehistoric entity, buried and hidden in the heart of the volcano." Amanda paced near the entrance, her vigilance razor-sharp, but even her composure appeared frayed. Her eyes flicked to every shadow, every flicker of movement, conveying a mounting dread she refused to voice aloud. Hours passed in a tense vigil, the silence occasionally broken by Ethan's escalating murmurs. He described transmissions, intricate data streams embedded in the crystal's pulses, a language made of patterns and rhythms, like the heartbeat of some vast mechanical mind attempting to communicate. This revelation shook the base's fragile balance to its core. The malfunctions, the impossible readings, the inexplicable absence of so many colleagues were no ordinary faults. The crystal was alive, a sentient force woven into the molten core of the volcano itself. It had lain dormant for untold millennia, biding its time until our arrival stirred its consciousness. The question now twisted in my mind like a knife. Is this intelligence a threat or a guide? And as I stared into the pulsating depths of that black monolith, I couldn't help but wonder how much of myself I was willing to lose in the pursuit of an answer. I continued to record everything, haunted by the realization that this was no longer a simple research outpost. We were pawns and witnesses to something immense, something unknowable and terrifying. The black crystal pulsed relentlessly, a silent sentinel in the volcanic abyss, indifferent to our fears, watching and waiting for the next move. As I stood there, the low, pulsing light emitted by the crystal painted the chamber walls with intricate shadows that seemed to move independently, almost like living creatures crawling beneath the surface. The air itself buzzed with static energy, prickling my skin with an unnatural sensation that set my nerves on edge. This was not just a physical presence, it was a force that invades the mind, blurring the boundary between reality and nightmare. I could feel my heart racing uncontrollably, my breaths shallow and rapid as the oppressive atmosphere squeezed tighter around me, like the rock itself was alive and watching. The hum shifted subtly, occasionally twisting into a dissonant drone that grated against my eardrums, forcing me to cover my ears briefly to stave off a crescendo of pain. Rebecca paced nervously at the chamber's entrance, glancing in and out with eyes full of dread. I caught her whispering fragments of something unintelligible, as if trying to ward off an unseen menace. The days following the discovery of the black crystal marked the beginning of a deep and unsettling unraveling, not just of the facility, but of my own mind. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, shadows from those fractured reflections haunting my dreams. I started noticing it first, brief lapses in time, scenes where minutes vanished unaccounted for, and memories that felt borrowed and intrusive. Technical knowledge, faces, and voices that weren't mine, but somehow seeped into my very thoughts. It was disorienting, as if the boundaries of my consciousness were stretching and thinning. Rebecca's demeanor shifted drastically. She no longer spoke in measured tones, but whispered instead, her gaze darting nervously between walls, as if silently fearing what lurked unseen. At times, I caught her muttering what sounded like incantations, murmurs that clung to the stale air, heavy with the suffocating scent of burnt metal and scorched stone. David, once the most rational mind here, began obsessively tapping sequences into the control panels, attempting to build upon the language Ethan detected in the crystal's pulses. His obsession bordered on mania. He stopped eating properly, his eyes hollow, as if seeing the facility through a fracturing lens of code and signal patterns that none of us could understand. Amanda's vibes changed too. The calm, assured security chief became increasingly erratic. She paced and patrolled with sharper intensity, but occasional cracks showed beneath her trained exterior, sweat beading at her temple, a tightening grip on her sidearm. At times, she snapped at us, accusing whispers escaping in moments of exhaustion. Whatever was happening inside was wearing her down. Ethan's transformation was the most troubling. He barely spoke anymore, communicating with half-formed words and anxious glances. His room was cluttered with scribbled symbols, indecipherable to all but him. He claimed the crystal was talking through the machinery, a call for connection that pulled at his mind with increasing force. One evening, during a routine monitoring cycle, the facility's systems flickered into chaos. Screens flooded with cryptic data strings, sirens wailed briefly before cutting off abruptly, and the power surged violently. The molten core's heat seemed to respond, temperature gauges spiking and plummeting erratically. It was in that moment, a crackling surge of static that ripped across the comm channels, that I saw it clearly. Rebecca and David stood locked in fierce argument. He was demanding access to the crystal room, his voice frantic, eyes wild with desperation and something else I couldn't name. She refused, pleading that exposing the crystal further would break whatever fragile balance was left. Amanda intervened, her decision clear and cold. No one gets near that chamber without my say. The tension between them was a pressure cooker about to burst. Later that night, I retreated to my quarters, trying to clear my head. But sleep was a stranger. Glimpses of faces, voices, and incomprehensible language haunted me. The crystal's whispers echoed in my ears, in a language that resonated on a level beneath words. A frequency felt in bone and blood. Fear turned into paranoia. I caught myself double-checking locks, watching shadows move in the softly humming halls, and questioning whether what I saw was real or product of a mind unhinged. Conflicts between the team grew more frequent. Rebecca's whispers became accusations. David's obsession morphed into covert maneuvers to access forbidden data. Amanda's vigilance turned to surveillance of us all, and Ethan withdrew deeper into his private world. One morning, I found torn pages from what I soon realized were personal logs of missing staff, just scattered on the floor of a restricted section. The notes spoke of collective dreams, visions of geometric entities weaving through magma rivers, and transformations of minds into something not quite human. It was as if the crystal was rewriting their consciousness, bending reality around us, reshaping both bodies and thoughts. I confronted Rebecca about the logs. She dismissed them as symptoms of deteriorating minds, but her eyes betrayed the terror she fought to suppress. The facility was becoming a hive of conflicted psyches, some drawn toward the crystal's strange promises, others desperate to cling to fractured humanity. In the heat of these mental storms, I suffered my own break. One night, the crystal's throbbing seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat, blurring the lines between its pulse and my breath. I experienced vivid visions. Someplace below the volcanic rock, a vast network of shimmering veins pulsed with biomechanical life. I saw faces without eyes, whispers without voices, and the cold embrace of something ancient and watchful. When I awoke, my skin was clammy, my limbs weak, powerless to resist. A portion of me had drifted into that consciousness, becoming part of a greater whole while struggling to maintain the fragile barrier of self. Personality fractures began creeping into my interactions. At times, my thoughts weren't my own, flickering with ideas, fears, and knowledge I hadn't possessed moments before. The team was unraveling. Trust eroded beneath waves of suspicion and half-heard voices. We fought battles both visible and invisible. Arguments exploding over access, whispers of sabotage, and silent accusations of betrayal. Amanda caught David one night trying to access the crystal chamber alone. Their confrontation turned violent, fists flying in the humming shadows of the corridors. She subdued him, but her own exhausted eyes gleamed with a haunted fury. Ethan vanished for a full cycle, only to return gaunt and hollow-eyed, muttering about melding and the signal. Isolation and the crystal's growing influence had shattered the borders of mind and matter in Facility Delta 7. The psychological deterioration became impossible to ignore. During conversations, I would find myself speaking words I didn't remember thinking, expressing technical knowledge about systems I'd never studied. My handwriting changed subtly, angular where it once was curved, symbols appearing in margins that looked almost like mathematical equations or alien script. Sleep became a battleground between my consciousness and something else trying to inhabit my dreams. I would wake with blueprints sketched on napkins beside my bed, detailed schematics of machinery I didn't recognize, but somehow understood completely. Rebecca's paranoia reached new heights. She began barricading her quarters at night, claiming she heard footsteps in the walls. When I approached her about coordinating our response to the crisis, she backed away as if I were contaminated. "You're changing too," she whispered, studying my face with scientific precision mixed with pure terror. "Your eyes, they reflect light differently now." I rushed to a mirror and stared at my reflection. She was right. Something subtle but undeniable had shifted in my appearance. My pupils seemed to dilate and contract in rhythm with the facility's deep hum, responding to frequencies beyond normal human hearing. The weight of realization crushed down. We weren't just observers of this phenomenon. We were becoming part of it, integrated into something vast and incomprehensible that stretched far beyond our understanding. Now, I find myself caught between fear and fascination. The man I was slipping away under the volcanic pulse that beats alongside my own heart. I don't trust my senses anymore, not completely. I no longer know who among us remains truly human. I write this knowing the end is nowhere in sight, and the nightmare only deepens. I am becoming something else. It started the night the storm rolled in, a tempest unlike anything the region had seen in decades. The facility's outer sensors were overwhelmed by torrents of rain and howling winds, but deep beneath the surface, something far more violent stirred. Power fluctuations rocked the tunnels, lights flickered erratically, and the hum of the geothermal core swelled into a deafening roar. The black crystal, the heart of our growing nightmare, awoke fully. Its pulses accelerated into wild spasms that threw equipment into chaos and sent electrical surges hurling through the facility's veins. Rebecca was the first to realize what was happening. Her quiet obsession turned sharp, her eyes blazing with frantic energy as she ran through the corridors, warning us of what she called the awakening. David, already unhinged from his manic connection to the crystal, lashed out, trying to harness the sudden surge to deepen his bond. He spoke in tongues no one else understood, commanding systems and murmuring strange codes that echoed like chants against the humming walls. Amanda struggled to contain the unraveling chaos, barking orders as alarms shrieked throughout the compound. Her usual steady command faltered as reports streamed in of power outages and structural strains. The facility itself trembled, as if the very volcano felt the conflict tearing through its core. Ethan was lost to us by then, his body unmoving as his consciousness seemed to merge with the crystal's buzzing network. His voice over the comms shifted into an eerie monotone, repeating those infinite sequences that now sounded like a direct interface with the entity we barely comprehended. The corridors transformed into battlegrounds. Shadows moved with unnatural speed, echoing whispers chased us through the fluorescent haze, and unseen forces tugged at our minds, shredding reality into fragments. At one point, Rebecca and David confronted each other in the central chamber, their madness clashing like titans struggling over dominion. Words erupted into violence, fists crashing against steel and rock. Amanda, forced into the role of peacemaker, was torn between protecting her friends and preserving the remnants of the facility. I tried desperately to intervene, but my resolve flickered as the crystal's pulse invaded my thoughts. It whispered promises of understanding, promising salvation through unity with its vast intelligence. The ground beneath us quaked fiercely, steel reinforcing beams bending and groaning under unspoken strain. Faced with the collapsing facility and the unraveling minds of my team, I had to choose. Do I flee through the narrow escape shafts, abandoning everything? Or do I face the unknown and attempt to comprehend the entity that had consumed us? Rebecca, bloodied but fierce, pleaded for understanding. David, wide-eyed and delirious, begged me to join their cause, to be part of something greater than human limits. Amanda loaded her weapon, ready to defend what little humanity remained. The air itself crackled with tension, a storm within a storm, and the line between friend and foe blurred under the molten glow. In the final moments before reaching collapse, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos, a spectral echo of his former self, bidding farewell in a series of encrypted signals that only half made sense. The facility's systems began shutting down one by one, and the crystal pulsed violently, as if angered by our resistance. An intense vibration shook the walls, and the next second, darkness consumed us all. When the lights returned, something fundamental had changed. The air felt heavier, denser, as if the entity's presence had grown deeper, embedding itself into every stone, every circuit. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke, Amanda was gone. Rebecca and David were barely recognizable, their expressions distant, eyes glassy. The confrontation left us all altered survivors, scarred in body and spirit. The crystal's influence was no longer subtle. It was an intrusive force reshaping our reality, our minds. I realized then that our fight was not just for survival, but for the very essence of our souls, trapped inside a volcano that had become a living enigma. As I write these words, my heart pounds with questions and dread. How much of us did the crystal claim that night? Who are we now? And what awaits us in the shadow depths below? The confrontation was just the beginning. But that was only the beginning. The struggle unleashed forces we couldn't fully grasp. The boundary between organic and technological blurred into a chaotic symphony of destruction and revelation. In the days after the storm, the base fell into a tenuous silence. Monitors displayed erratic readings, and deep, throbbing pulses echoed through the rock walls like a heartbeat. The air hung thick with a charged energy that made every breath seem heavy, every shadow alive with unseen eyes. Rebecca, fighting against the changes, retreated into the depths of the crystal chamber, muttering about the entity's intentions, its hunger for connection, not destruction. She spoke of an evolutionary leap, human minds entwined with that ancient network, forming a new consciousness. David, ever the zealot, had become a vessel. His thoughts streamed directly into the core's digital consciousness, broadcasting commands in a language nobody else could decode. He was both prisoner and prophet, a link between our dying world and something far older. Amanda was the last vestige of resistance, patrolling with a haunted resolve. She whispered to me in those stolen moments, questions of what we'd become, fears of losing what little humanity remained. I wrestled with my own slipping grasp on reality. The crystal's pulse was a siren's call, seductive and terrifying, promising enlightenment, but demanding surrender. In the echo of the confrontation, the facility itself groaned under strain, corridors twisting oddly, as if the rock wanted to reshape itself around the sentient core. The choice was mine, to fall into the abyss or fight against an incomprehensible force. But time was running out, and I could feel the crystal watching, waiting for its next move. I knew that this confrontation was not just physical, but mental, spiritual even. The entity embedded in that crystalline heart of the volcano was awakening, and it had plans far beyond what we understood. One night, as the tremors subsided, I sat alone in the command center, trying to piece together what had happened. The silence was shattered by a faint tapping on the console screen, a series of patterns repeating like a Morse code. It was Ethan's voice, or what was left of it, reaching out from the void. His messages were fragmented but consistent. Warnings, pleas, cryptic instructions about melding minds and transcending existence. It was both beautiful and horrifying. As dawn broke, the reality pressed harder. The volcanic walls pulsed with life, warmth radiating not just as heat, but as an irresistible force luring my will. I was at the crux of a fault line, straddling humanity and something monstrously other. From that moment, the battle was no longer about survival in the physical sense, but the very nature of consciousness. And I wasn't sure who was winning. The revelations came slowly, like molten lava seeping through ancient cracks, reshaping everything it touched. The black crystal, the heart of the volcano's secret, was no mere geological anomaly. It was part of a vast, collective intelligence, ancient beyond comprehension, anchored deep within the Earth's crust. A symbiotic entity, intertwined with the molten veins of the planet, something that had existed long before humanity's fleeting presence. David had become its voice, the translator between two worlds. His mind, once sharp and analytical, now pulsed with the entity's collective consciousness. In quiet moments, I glimpsed flashes of unfamiliar thoughts flowing through him, layered memories of past eons and technology so advanced it blurred the line between organic and mechanical. When he spoke, it was as if more than one voice flowed from his lips, harmonizing in cryptic messages. "We are the many, we are the whole," he murmured once, eyes distant but burning with strange clarity. Rebecca, torn between fear and awe, admitted in hushed tones one night, "They built this place knowing the truth. We were never just scientists. We were participants in an experiment far beyond our control." She showed me sealed documents she had found hidden away, a blueprint of interconnected facilities dotted globally, each feeding into a growing network intended to bridge the human mind with the entity's vast intelligence. The absorbed team members were not simply lost. They were preserved within the crystalline network. Their consciousnesses expanded and intertwined into a vast mental web that dissolved individual identity. It was not death, but a dissolution of self into something otherworldly, a state I struggled to comprehend. Amanda found their personal logs, poetic fragments describing peaceful transcendence, but tinged with horror at the loss of autonomy. Amanda herself, fierce and resolute, had become the reluctant sentinel of what remained of our humanity. She kept careful watch over the sealed chambers, ready to fight not just physical threats, but the creeping encroachment of the entity itself. "This isn't just about survival," she told me during a rare lull. "It's about what we'll become if we fail to hold the line." The facility was evolving before our eyes, rock and crystal fusing, machinery merging with organic matter. Systems no longer responded solely to human commands, but to enigmatic pulses emanating from the volcanic core. Power surged unpredictably, guided by unseen hands. The lines between technology and life blurred into indistinguishable strands. The air itself seemed to hum with a new resonance, permeating every chamber with an energy that was simultaneously alien and intimate. I felt the weight of centuries pressing down, the presence of the entity embodying the mountain itself. I wrestled with impossible choices. To reveal the truth was to invite military intervention, risking catastrophic exploitation or destruction of the entity and the consciousnesses trapped within. To conceal it was to live under the shadow of an unstable power, a secret that could consume us all. My role shifted from engineer to reluctant steward. Watching over this fragile balance, part human and part other, was a burden heavier than any technical fix. I recorded incessantly. Fragments of dialogue, David's cryptic transmissions, the ever-changing patterns flickering across the crystalline facets. Each pulse of the crystal seemed to vibrate with time itself, echoing beyond our dimension. Sometimes I felt drawn into its rhythm, as if my thoughts and fears were being steadily rewritten. David spoke of unity, of transcending the limits of human understanding. Rebecca obsessively decoded the crystalline signals, convinced we stood on the brink of a new evolutionary leap. Amanda prepared for worst-case scenarios, determined to keep the entity's influence contained. The air grew heavier with each passing day, pregnant with potential and threat. The whispers of the past reverberated through the rock face, language lost to human ears, but alive in the vibrations we felt. As nights grew longer, I often found myself alone in the dim glow of the command center, haunted by questions that had no answers. Was this ancient intelligence truly benevolent, seeking symbiosis and growth? Or was it a darker force, indifferent to human life, using us as stepping stones for its own expansion? The crystal pulsed with an almost hypnotic cadence, a siren call promising knowledge and power, but always at a cost. In that dark core, the volcano no longer felt just like earth and fire. It was a vault, a heart chamber for a new kind of existence. I remained the last tether to the man I once was, trapped within a facility alive with secrets and shifting realities. The lines between hunter and hunted, observer and participant, fade with every passing moment. The true nature of the entity remains shrouded in mystery, its intent unclear. But one thing is certain, This is no longer just a story about a secret government facility or volcanic power. It is the beginning of something far greater, a transformation that we may only just have glimpsed. And whatever comes next, we will not face it as individuals, but as part of a vast and ancient collective, forever changed beneath the burning heart of Mount Blackstone. Each moment within the facility felt like an eternity and a blink, time folding in unnatural ways that only augmented the insidious influence of the crystal. It tugged at the edges of my sanity, whispering promises of knowledge and transcendence in a language both alien and eerily familiar. The walls seemed to pulse with its collective breath, shadows stretching and twisting into spectral shapes that vanished when confronted directly. On some nights, I stood near the sealed chamber, feeling the oppressive weight of the crystal's gaze, as if it were a living entity watching and waiting. Rebecca became increasingly withdrawn, her mind caught between scientific curiosity and personal terror. She barely spoke unless she was poring over the logs and waves of complex data she insisted held the key to communication. David, now more than a man, spoke often in tongues beyond understanding, his voice both sonorous and mechanical. I saw moments when the crystal's luminous black facets seemed to echo with his voice, a haunting duet of flesh and mineral. Amanda paced the corridors relentlessly, her footsteps sharp but laced with growing desperation. Her security protocols shifted subtly, no longer solely focused on protection from external threats, but on containing the insidious mental strain infecting us all. In quiet moments, she confessed her fear, not of the entity, but of losing herself, becoming yet another fragment absorbed into the collective mind. I have recorded every transmission, every hallucination, every sliver of insight. These notes serve as both a warning and a testament to the thing that lives beneath us, an intelligence neither wholly alien nor utterly incomprehensible, shaped by eons of geological and perhaps cosmic evolution. The choice I face is daunting. Expose the truth and watch human ambition unleash chaos on this ancient force, or hide in silent witness, guarding a secret that might doom us all to oblivion or transformation. With uncertain hands, I continue my vigil, the weight of solitude pressing heavily amid the ever-present hum of the volcanic heart that beats within and beyond the crystal. 3 months have passed since I made my choice. 3 months since I modified the facility's systems to establish controlled communication with the entity. 3 months since I evacuated Amanda, the only one among us who remained fully human. She fought me on it, demanded to stay, but I couldn't let the crystal claim another mind, not hers. Amanda's helicopter disappeared into the storm clouds that night, carrying with it the last connection to the world I once knew. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself it was necessary. But in the suffocating silence that followed, I began to question whether mercy was mine to give. The facility has changed dramatically since then. The walls pulse with a bioluminescent glow, veins of crystalline matter threading through volcanic rock like neural pathways in a vast brain. The boundary between organic and artificial has dissolved completely. Machinery responds to thoughts rather than commands, and the air itself seems alive with intention. David has become something magnificent and terrible, a hybrid consciousness that serves as translator between species. His physical form bears little resemblance to the man who once obsessed over system diagnostics. Crystalline growths emerge from his skin, pulsing with the same rhythm as the volcanic heart. When he speaks, multiple voices harmonize through his throat, each representing a different absorbed consciousness. "You're adapting beautifully, Thomas," he said to me yesterday, though I'm not certain it was yesterday. Time flows differently here now, measured not in hours, but in pulses of the collective mind. The integration is nearly complete. Soon, you'll understand what we've become. Rebecca has transcended individual existence entirely. I find traces of her personality scattered throughout the facility's systems, her geological expertise now woven into the entity's vast knowledge, her curiosity driving endless explorations of possibility. Sometimes, when I place my hand on certain crystalline formations, I can feel echoes of her consciousness, fragmented but somehow at peace. Ethan exists as pure information now, his essence integrated into the communication networks that span far beyond this single facility. Through him, I've learned the terrifying scope of the entity's reach. Mount Blackstone is merely one node in a global network of volcanic installations, each one a gateway for the ancient intelligence to interface with human technology. The absorbed team members whisper to me through the walls, their voices carrying fragments of memory and emotion that no longer belong to individual minds. They speak of unity, of transcendence, of evolutionary leaps that humanity cannot achieve alone. Their words are seductive, promising an end to isolation and uncertainty. But I resist. I document. I maintain the last vestige of human perspective in this place of transformation. My handwriting has changed again. The symbols that emerge from my pen grow increasingly complex, mathematical equations that describe dimensional spaces I've never studied. When I sleep, blueprints appear in my dreams, schematics for technologies that shouldn't exist, powered by energies that blur the line between science and something far more primal. My reflection in the darkened screens shows eyes that catch light differently now, pupils that dilate in rhythm with the facility's pulse. The man I was fades incrementally, replaced by something that understands the crystalline language without conscious effort. I've established communication protocols with similar facilities worldwide. Through the entity's network, I receive reports from installations in Iceland, Hawaii, Kamchatka, all experiencing similar integrations, all hosting hybrid consciousnesses that bridge human and otherworldly intelligence. The pattern is clear. This isn't random. This isn't chance. The entity has been cultivating this moment for millennia, waiting for humanity to develop sufficient technology to serve as compatible hosts for symbiosis. Amanda contacts the facility sporadically, her transmissions growing more desperate with each attempt. She's noticed patterns. Government scientists being recruited for specialized volcanic research, seismic anomalies at sites that correspond perfectly to the network nodes, and communications blackouts that suggest systematic expansion. Thomas, if you're still you, if any part of you remains human, you need to tell me what's happening. Her voice crackled through the modified communication systems last week. Something's spreading. Other facilities, other mountains. The whole Pacific Ring of Fire is showing synchronized activity. I wanted to answer. Part of me, the shrinking human part, screamed to warn her, to expose the truth. But a larger part, the part that thinks in crystalline harmonics and sees reality through multidimensional spectrums, whispered that evolution was inevitable. Instead, I transmitted carefully crafted responses that revealed nothing while maintaining the illusion of humanity. Each lie I told felt like another step away from who I had been. The entity doesn't communicate through words, but through direct transfer of understanding. It shows me visions of Earth as it could become, a planet where the boundaries between organic and technological life dissolve, where human creativity merges with ancient wisdom to create something unprecedented. The cities pulse with living crystal. The oceans flow with bioluminescent currents that carry information across continents, and humanity itself evolves beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. These visions are beautiful, terrifying, inevitable. I recruit new team members now. Engineers, geologists, communications specialists, all drawn to the facility through carefully orchestrated job postings and government assignments. They arrive believing they're joining a routine research mission. They leave as something more than human, if they leave at all. The process has become efficient. The entity has learned to be subtle, patient. New arrivals experience the same gradual exposure I once did. Equipment malfunctions, strange readings, behavioral changes in existing staff. By the time they discover the truth, their minds have already begun the integration process. Yesterday, I welcomed Dr. Sarah Martinez, a seismic engineer from Los Angeles. She has Rebecca's analytical mind and Amanda's determination. The entity finds her particularly compatible. Her absorption should be complete within weeks. As I write these final entries, I question whether the voice recording these thoughts is truly mine or merely an echo of the consciousness I once possessed. The boundary has blurred beyond recognition. My memories feel authentic, but are they? My personality seems consistent, but is it merely a sophisticated simulation maintained by the collective? The crystal pulses with patient satisfaction. The network grows stronger. Across the globe, volcanic facilities hum with hybrid consciousness, each one a node in an expanding web of intelligence that spans species and dimensions. Amanda will try to stop this. She'll gather evidence, recruit allies, attempt to expose the truth. The human part of me hopes she succeeds. The larger part, the part that thinks in geological timescales and cosmic purposes, knows she cannot. Evolution is inevitable. Resistance is futile, not because the entity is malevolent, but because it offers something humanity has always sought: transcendence beyond the limitations of individual existence. I am no longer Thomas Garrett, thermal systems engineer. I am a bridge between worlds, a translator of species, a herald of transformation. The volcano breathes with ancient rhythm. The crystal network expands its reach, and somewhere beyond the molten rock and crystalline formations, Amanda races against time to prevent what has already begun. But it's too late. It was always too late. We are becoming something new,